when you say intellectual clarity, you are actually talking about a premeditated clarity. Intellectual clarity can get you into a bigger mess. Now you may mess things up in a very scholarly way. So my question is only this: how is then intellectual clarity a stepping stone to anything? So that is why scriptures cannot help you beyond a point, because you are a living being, you are very smart. You will not let scriptures corner you that easily. So I used to simply ask them, who came first? Human beings came first or books came first? Dharma looks like a very nice concept to begin with, but if you try to keenly inquire into it, it vanishes. Dharmaraya is saying. He is basically challenging intellectual clarity when he's talking about all these things.
But why intellectual clarity is not stepping stone for perception? There may be
No, we are not able to accept it. That is the problem. You said.
Clarity of thought or intellectual clarity. It's very often used, commonly used word. So I want to explore that. To begin with, I'll ask a simple question before I proceed. Would you say that there is something called intellectual clarity? Would you say that it is a valid thing to say? Intellectual clarity, clarity of thought. Would you say it is a valid phrase?
Yes, sir.
Others?
Yes, to some extent, yes. Clarity of thoughts.
Okay, you put a clause to some extent.
The clarity that you want, there is, it's not quantifiable. What is the degree? That's why, to some extent, in the sense that at least it gives you clarity of thought that you can make good decisions. To that extent, yes, you can. I think it is valid. That's why.
Okay. Anindita said it is not valid. I will come to her later. Others, what do you say? If you hear this word, or if you yourself use this, intellectual clarity, clarity of thought, would you go with that, or would you question that itself?
When we say intellect, it means that it is clarity predefined, or it is assumed that it is a clarity that leads to the use of intellect.
You are telling by intellect by itself is clarity.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. If it is valid, I'm going with that it is valid. Because it's a word that is used very often. If it is a valid phrase, how would you understand, or how would you explain what is meant by intellectual clarity? Amarjit already said something. She said it would help you take decisions.
While analyzing something, if we have any confusion, then there is no clarity. If we have proper clarity that this is right, this action is right, or this thought process is right, this opinion is right or wrong, right or wrong. You have correct clarity that this is right, this is wrong. That is clarity. If you are confused, it is not clear. Like it is confused. It is not clear state.
Okay. I'm going to challenge the very phrase intellectual clarity. Listen to this carefully. This is a little subtle. Let me take an example. You have very often heard me talk about this, that extremes always look similar. Extremes always look similar. So what is happening normally is that people think of everything in terms of duality. So they will try to put everything into this bucket or that bucket. They will think only in terms of two. But now somebody came and they told, no, it's not two, there are three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. And very, very often tamas and sattva will look very similar. And that's why you are confusing 3 to be 2. And that is why you are confusing tamas as sattva or sattva as tamas. So I explained this to you now. I told you about 3 gunas. I told you the names of the gunas. And I told you that extremes look similar. I explained all this to you. I gave you some knowledge. So you would say this is intellectual clarity?
For some extent, yes, sir. Because you had that knowledge only 2, plus or minus. Here you have given one third angle. So whatever knowledge you had, in that some clarity you have gained, but not completely, because you have not experienced it. Unless until you own that knowledge, when you see that practically or when you experience it, then completely clarity will be there.
Okay. So you are telling intellectual clarity comes as a stepping stone to some actual clarity, experiential clarity.
Correct.
Let me take one particular example of that. Extremes looking similar. We can take many examples, like sleep and meditation look similar. And somebody who has not understood anything that you have told them won't ask you any questions. Somebody who has understood everything that you have told them won't ask questions. Both will sit quiet. Like this, you can give many, many examples. Or you can say, some conflict is happening between 2 people, and you see one person sitting quietly, not engaging in that conflict. So now he could be sitting quiet out of fear. He's just very timid. So he doesn't want to handle the situation. He just wants to just step back and just be passive. Tamas. Or it could be some kind of maturity where they saw that there is no point in engaging with this fellow and they simply kept quiet. That is very childish. There is no point telling him anything, and they kept quiet out of maturity. So they can keep quiet out of opposite reasons.
Correct.
Now, suppose there is somebody who has absolutely no knowledge of 3 gunas, nothing. He doesn't know anything. He has not even gone to school. He doesn't even know to read and write. Forget about philosophy and 3 gunas. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know any words. Now, such a person, suppose he witnesses this kind of situation. 2 people are fighting and one of them is keeping quiet. But this simple man, he recognizes that this person is sitting quiet out of maturity. He is not sitting quiet out of fear. He recognizes. He's a very simple man. He has not learned anything. He's not educated. But looking at the situation keenly, he recognizes he's keeping quiet out of maturity. He doesn't know, sattva, tamasu, they look similar, blah, blah. He knows nothing. Absolutely nothing. But he just looked at the situation and he saw, okay, this person is sitting quiet out of maturity. He realizes there's no point fighting with the other fellow, so that's why he's keeping quiet. And in another situation, the same kind of situation where 2 people are fighting, and again there one fellow is keeping quiet. Again, when this simple man looks at that, maybe he recognizes, okay, this fellow is sitting quiet because he's afraid to engage in conflict. He recognizes all the 3 possibilities, but he doesn't know that this is sattva, this is tamas, this is rajas. He doesn't know. But he's recognizing each situation as it is. Now consider an opposite situation where instead of the simple man, you have a man with this intellectual clarity. Suppose you are there. you have all this intellectual clarity about the gunas, and it's not duality, it is triality and this and you witnessed the same situation. You looked at the same thing, that one conflict is happening, but one fellow is keeping quiet, not engaging. But suppose you are not able to look into that situation keenly. He may be sitting quiet out of maturity, but you may say he's doing it out of fear. And you may explain that with all this scholarly explanation. You know, extremes look similar, forgiveness and fear will look similar. We always confuse. This man is actually sitting quiet out of fear, but you may think he's sitting quiet out of forgiveness. You may make the exactly opposite conclusion, wrong conclusion, and you may give all this intellectual discourse explanation as to why you came to that conclusion. Whereas that simple man who doesn't know anything, he doesn't know sattva, rajas, tamas, nothing, but when he's looking at the situation, he's perceptive enough and he's recognizing something as it is. So where is the role of intellectual clarity? My simple question is this. If that simple man can recognize the situation, looking at that conflicting situation, two people are fighting and one fellow is keeping quiet and he's recognizing it as it is actually what is happening, he has no intellectual clarity. So my question is only this, how is then intellectual clarity a stepping stone to anything? He doesn't have intellectual clarity, I'm saying. But he recognizes, he may not be even able to articulate to you that extremes look similar and all that. He may not be able to explain to you at all. But for himself, he's recognizing, looking at that, okay, this man is keeping quiet out of maturity, that man is keeping quiet out of fear. He's recognizing. Is it possible to recognize or not without having all the intellectual clarity? It's possible. So where is the role of intellectual clarity if you consider that situation only? The only use I can see of intellectual clarity is that when that simple man saw it and he recognized what actually is happening, intellectual clarity will come in handy only to describe the situation to others. He's recognizing something as it is, but he's not able to articulate it. He will simply say, no, he's keeping quiet out of maturity. Others won't believe him. So in this case, if he has intellectual clarity, he can use language and clarity of words to communicate to others actually what is happening. He will tell, oh, there are three things, sattva, rajas, tamas. You are all always trying to look at in terms of duality, either keeping quiet or not keeping quiet, but it is not so simple. Keeping quiet may happen because of opposite reasons. He may be able to explain it. Intellectual clarity will help him only to explain to someone else a particular instance of such confusion. But for him, or for you to yourself have clarity of perception, intellectual clarity has no role. On the contrary, intellectual clarity can make you, can get you into a bigger mess. Earlier, when you did not have all this knowledge about the three gunas, you didn't know about the three things exist and all that. Earlier, you were thinking only in terms of duality, and you were confusing things because of this simpler confusion. Now somebody came to you and told, our darshanas, philosophy says there are three, and now you acquired that knowledge. Now you may mess things up in a very scholarly way. Now you may still see the situation wrongly. You may still not see clearly what is happening, but you will give scholarly explanation for it. You may be confusing fear as forgiveness and forgiveness as fear, whatever. You may be confusing. And you may explain it very scholarly way to others using these words, sattva, rajas, tamas. So not only is intellectual clarity not a stepping stone for clarity of perception, it can even become a hindrance. Did you understand this example? I've taken a simple example because this is something I've been telling very repeatedly. This is one of my favorite things. I say extremes look similar. It may look to you as if I'm giving you a conclusion. Extremes look similar and it is done and dusted. But actually, I'm not giving you a final conclusion. I'm telling you, extremes look similar. They will look similar. Every situation, you will have to be very attentive and look. That's all that conclusion is telling you finally. It is not giving you any formula. It is not giving you any rule that any situation that you come across will be like this or like that.
I was thinking that like a person that you referred to first is able to see that the other person is not involved because of his maturity. Could also be because this person right now is not that attached to whatever is happening. Say the person was a little attached, he had some stake in the whole thing. In that case, I feel the knowledge of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas might come handy, where he will be able to see that, I'm getting pulled. I'm not.
It will come in handy only to not make a conclusion and look. That's all.
No, agree, yes, agree. But if it is not known, okay, so wherever I have nothing at stake, I might be able to see through. But if I have something at stake, then I might not. I would fall in the trap. But if I have this intellectual, this understanding, then I might be able to bring it.
You might be able to bring in what?
Meaning remind myself there that, something is at stake. Maybe that's why I'm getting dragged in.
Yes, that's fine. That's correct. I'm only pointing out that there is no such thing as intellectual clarity in the sense nobody can give you a clarity beforehand. When you say intellectual clarity, you are actually talking about a premeditated clarity. And I'm telling such a thing doesn't exist. Each situation has to be looked keenly. Intellect can't give you clarity. What you're saying basically is it will give answer the next question if I read it. Now, if I said this, the intellect can't give you clarity. On the contrary, it can mess you up further in a very scholarly way. Then you will naturally ask, then what is the use of learning so much? What is the use of doing all this intellectual circus? The only use of doing all this intellectual circus is to challenge all the conclusions you are making presently and to take you to a state of inconclusiveness so that you will open your eyes wide and be awake. That is all its purpose is. So what you said just now is that one.
Oops.
What I did just now is the same thing actually. What I did with a simple example, what I did is again the same thing. There was a conclusion in you that there is such a thing as intellectual clarity and it is helping me in my life. And I'm challenging it, showing intellectual clarity cannot help you. I'm challenging that very fundamental conclusion with which everyone is living. It's not a small thing, actually. Challenging that conclusion is not a small thing. Because whenever you face a situation, whenever you come across any kind of situation, you look less and you think more. That is what is presently happening. The moment there is a situation in front of you, you do look. I'm not saying you're completely blind. There is some attention, but that because of that micro-minute attention, the next moment you're looking at your thought process and you start running it. It will start running, it will start running. And you are no more looking. Presently, because there is this very deep conclusion in a human being that intellect can make me see clearly, they're always looking towards the intellect, are always looking towards thought process. That is consuming all the energy that you have. Now, what we are doing using the intellect is challenging that very conclusion that there is such a thing as intellectual clarity. If you really challenge it, that means when you come across some situation next, your energies will not be invested into thought process. First, it will be invested into your attention to look at something. Once you have seen something, okay, to whatever level of clarity, then thought process can be used to figure out how to handle this, what to do, whatever skills you can bring in, or whatever knowledge you have earlier, the reference points, whatever. You can bring in all that thought process later to handle the situation. But first you will have, the first step is being missed, not entirely missed, but almost missed. Because there is this strong conclusion that thought process is the one that is making me see life clearly. That first step is happening just for a microsecond. Actually looking at something. You look at something, close your eyes, then you're in thought process. Thought is running, giving you conclusions, that is like this, that is like that. And you will think that is clarity. So when you go to I gave you one example, but the very purpose of going to a spiritual discourse is, and using your intellect there, listening to somebody's intellectual explanation, the only purpose of all that intellectual process is only to challenge your already made up conclusions and to take you to a state of inconclusiveness. State of inconclusiveness, I don't mean nothing can be done. I'm saying intellectual inconclusiveness. If you're intellectually inconclusive, you will start looking more in a state of wonder. You will be more attentive, that's all. To perceive more, to grasp more, you will not be vesting yourself into intellect. If you keenly observe, this is all a spiritual teacher tries to do. If he's trying to do something else, it is not a spiritual discourse, actually. Clarity of perception is what actually matters, is not something that I am telling you, you already know it. But there is a conclusion that is blocking it because intellect is given the superior position, thought process is given the superior position. You are trying to override the actuality with a conclusion. I only challenged it and brought reality to the forefront. You already know that clarity of perception is the only thing that matters. In fact, when we utter the word clarity, it should only mean clarity of perception. There is no such thing as intellectual clarity. Even if you use it, it is meaningful only in the way I just told you. It will help you in articulation to others and whatever. You already know that clarity of perception is the ultimate. I'll tell you one example that your own behavior shows that. See, people look up to others for a variety of reasons, starting from the most superficial reasons, like they are good looking. You leave all that silly stuff. People look up to film stars because they are good looking, because they are whatever. You leave all that. People look up to others because they are skillful in one particular field. You leave that also. Not interested in that. Like sports or films or whatever, they are very talented. You look up to them. That's again just a very, very specific aspect of life. It doesn't apply to life in its entirety. So you leave all such things. But when you talk of looking up to somebody, or when people admire others entirely, as in a very fundamental thing, they admire others' personality, other people, for a variety of reasons. Like they will say, he's very, very logical, he's very, very logical, very intellectual, and very sharp. People look up to others for this reason. One reason. People look up to others saying they are very, very knowledgeable. He has read a lot of scriptures, he knows a lot, he has traveled a lot, he has a lot of experience, he has a lot of knowledge, wisdom. So people look up to others for that. People look up to others for the reason that they are good. They are noble people. They are very pious people. They are very, you understand what I'm saying. They are very pious people, noble people. Therefore, they will look up to others. When you look up to someone else, when you admire someone else, in a very fundamental sense, which covers the entirety of life, not just one aspect of life, you look up to people, admire people for all these reasons. They're very logical. They're very scholarly and knowledgeable. They are very noble. You look up to people for all these reasons. When you look up to people for all these reasons, it is only a matter of time that it will crumble. It is only a matter of time when your own opinions will override that person that you're looking up to. You know why? Do you know why? I'm saying you are admiring somebody because they're very logical. Suppose example, they're very logical. You're looking up to them, you admire them. And you admire them, they're telling very, very nice things, intellectually sharp things. And someday they said something about a particular matter in the country or something. They said something, and you heard that. You had an exactly opposite opinion. Now, what will win in this condition is your opinion. You will challenge them. For you, your opinion will be on a higher pedestal. They will immediately come below. You are looking up to them. You had put them on the pedestal because they are logical. But when your opinion, when it clashed with your opinion, your opinion will immediately come up. Do you know why? Because your opinion is based on something that you have seen directly, at least. It may not be something that is very clear. You have a very deep clarity of perception about something. But whatever opinions you have formed is eventually based on something that you have direct perception of, to whatever extent it is. You will say, I know it personally. It is not so. It is a fact. Your opinion is based on something you have directly seen. What you have directly seen cannot be challenged by anybody, no matter how logical they are. What I am pointing out is, you will naturally keep direct perception above everything else. Earlier, you might have thought that intellectual sharpness is the great thing. I admire him for his intellectual sharpness. But the moment he told something which contradicts something that you have directly seen, and an opinion that you have made up because of your direct perception of something, you will immediately change the hierarchy. Your opinion will come above. See, that opinion, finally, it may be perverted and inverted and all that. Eventually, it may get perverted so much that it becomes invalid. But as far as you are concerned, you know that your opinion is based on some perception. You have perceived something, you have seen something, or whatever, and your opinion is based on that. And naturally, you will keep that above logic. You will keep that above nobility. You will keep that above scholarliness. You will keep that above wisdom. You will keep that above everything. If you look up to somebody, if you admire somebody because of all these reasons, I am telling, it is only a matter of time that they will be pulled down from that pedestal in your mind. It is only a matter of time, because these things are not the final things, according to you only. Even according to you, the supreme position is given to clarity of perception, direct perception, not intellect, not knowledge, not nobility. That is why I also pointed out in that post that if at all you admire somebody, come to admire somebody, if at all you come to look up to somebody, the only reason that you should look up to them should be because you accept that they have more clarity of perception than you. When you look up to somebody for this reason, what will happen now? Suppose you saw they have clarity of perception. They are telling things as it is. And one day, suppose they said something which contradicts with your opinion. What should happen now? If you have accepted they have more clarity of perception into life, into human mind, into human condition as a whole, naturally you will challenge your opinion, not them. or else you have to give up your earlier decision that you came to, that they have more clarity. You have to give up that and go to somebody else. Are you following what I'm saying? If you continue to say that they have more clarity of perception, then you have to necessarily challenge your own opinion. You can't challenge them. The moment you challenge them, it means you are indirectly telling that I have more clarity than them. So your own behavior itself shows clarity of perception is what matters. Intellectual knowledge can only come in handy as a tool. See, even with me right now, I may be somebody who has clarity of perception. I don't know about three gunas and everything, but I may be able to, probably I'm recognizing everything as it is. But I have not understood it as three gunas, extremes looking similar and all that. And because of that, I will not be able to tell you this. I won't be able to give you this lecture. If I did not have some intellectual skill, I wouldn't be able to tell you all this. But by myself, I will be fine. By myself, I will be recognizing situations as they are. Clarity of perception is the one that actually fundamentally matters. Intellectual clarity is just a secondary thing which I can only use as a tool to articulate it to others and even to myself, maybe sometimes. I'm telling it is not a stepping stone. It is not necessary that you have to come to intellectual clarity and then clarity of perception. It is not necessarily a stepping stone. On the contrary, it can become a nuisance also. It can even become a nuisance. Instead of you using your intellect to challenge your existing conclusions and becoming inconclusive, instead of doing that, you may use your intellect to make up more conclusions, more and more layers, and become even less attentive than before. Because now you think, I know more. Now you will not look because you have made up extra conclusions, thinking that is what will help you. Like if you ask this question, then what is the use of studying scriptures? If you ask me, this should be the only use of studying scriptures. Scriptures should be used only to challenge your existing conclusions. If they don't do that, if they start giving you conclusions, it's going in the wrong direction. And that is precisely why scriptures cannot help you. Because do you think you will let something challenge your conclusions so easily? You may do it to some extent in the beginning. You may read something and you will say some easy conclusions, some superficial conclusions which you have made. You may very easily open it up and let it get destroyed by the scriptures. But as they start telling something deeper, you know what you will do? You will use that to protect what you have already concluded. Survival instinct will come in. Nobody will just like that let their conclusions be destroyed, demolished. It will never happen. A book by itself, which is a dead thing. You're a living being. The book is a dead thing. It may have some knowledge written by a living person, fine. But that person is no more there alive to challenge you right now. What circus you will do with the thought process. So you may read something, and instead of letting it challenge your conclusions, you will start making more conclusions and become scholarly, think intellectual clarity is coming, thinking it will help you to see life more clearly. Yeah, what I was meaning to say earlier was, not only is intellect not only is intellectual clarity not a stepping stone to clarity of perception, intellectual clarity has no connection with clarity of perception. No connection at all. That's what I was coming to say at that time. So that is why scriptures cannot help you beyond a point, because you are a living being, you are very smart. Your cleverness will come into the picture. You will not let scriptures corner you that easily. You will not let them challenge your conclusions that easily. On the contrary, you will take scriptural conclusion, whatever they are telling, to your side and make new conclusions only. That is why it is necessary. Either you are attentive enough and looking at things by yourself, or if you want to take the help of someone else, it can't be a book. Finally, a book can't help you. You are too clever for a book. I will tell you something from Mahabharata I read recently. You know Yudhishthira, Dharmaraja, the people used to call him Dharmaraja, meaning they looked at him as some kind of epitome of Dharma. Here you take that word Dharma as knowing what to do, what not to do, what is right, what is wrong, in a very general sense. Dharma is that it actually means clarity of perception. Dharma, if you are dharmic, it means you clearly know in what situation, what is the best thing to do. That's all it means actually. So Dharma is a very commonly debated thing in Mahabharata and Ramayana. Now this fellow, when he is talking to Bhishma in Shanti Parva, there is Shanti Parva, a very, very long chapter. And Bhishma is telling him many, many things, giving him Gyan. There are at least two places I have seen. In one place it is more articulate, where Dharmaraja says, what we are referring to as Dharma and Adharma, I think it cannot be ascertained by reading scriptures. Because, first of all, scriptures themselves have contradicting statements. Finally, because whatever you try to state it can never be a final rule. Meaning intellectual, when you say intellectual clarity, it implies that there is some kind of formula which you can apply. Some kind of final formula which will apply no matter what all the time. So he's saying there is no such thing. Because of that, you will start seeing contradicting statements. In one place, he will say, this is the thing to do, right thing to do. In another place, he will say, that is the right thing to do. He's saying there are contradicting statements in the Vedas. And he makes many points. Another interesting point he makes is that very frequently it is said that if you ask what is Dharma, then the answer given is whatever Satpurushas follow, that is Dharma. Satpurushas means noble people. Finally, whatever Satpurushas follow is Dharma. And if you ask who are Satpurushas, the answer given is whoever follows Dharma is a Satpurusha. It is just a loop. He is himself telling it. He's articulating it this way. Saying it just becomes Anyonya thing. And now how do you decide who is Satpurusha? How do you decide what is Dharma? You're just putting a loop, referencing to each other. Another point he makes is that we see many a time we see in the world that some adharma will be done in the guise of dharma, sometimes dharma will be done in the guise of adharma. So how do we finally decide what is dharma? How do we put it into a statement that this is dharma, this is adharma? And the word he uses is alakshana. Sadachara means whatever you call it, good conduct or dharmic conduct. He says it is alakshana. Alakshana means you cannot give a final rule, an indication saying this is sadachara. He is basically challenging intellectual clarity when he's talking about all these things. Because Bhishma was going on telling him long lectures. this is Dharma, that is Sadachara, this is Satpurusha, whatever. At some point, this man who is called Dharmaraja, who is considered to be the epitome of Dharma, is saying, how do you decide Dharma? You can't. It is alakshana. It has no final indication saying this is Dharma. You can't put it like that. In another way, he says that Dharma looks like a very nice concept to begin with, but if you try to keenly inquire into it, it vanishes. These are his exact words. Do you know what it implies? He's implying the same thing. You will start saying, you will begin with your intellect saying, now I will decide what is Dharma, and you start thinking. And he's saying, if you go on inquiring like that using the intellect, eventually you will see so many kinds of situations, so many contradicting things. This can be that, that can be this. Oh, you will get confused. Finally, he says, it will vanish. In the sense, you can't capture it with the intellect. He's telling all these things with the language, whatever was available to him at that time. He's basically talking about whatever I usually talk of as pixelation. Intellect is pixelated. It is finally, if you zoom into it sufficiently, it will be patchy. It is not smooth, continuous thing which can capture something in its entirety. It will be patchy. It is only an approximation. When you look at it from a distance, it will look very smooth and nice to you. When you keenly inquire into it, look into it, it will start looking patchy. It will look ugly. Meaning, it will challenge whatever conclusions you have earlier made. So he says, Dharma is, this phrase you might have heard very often. They say Dharma Sukshma, Dharma Sukshma. They use the word Dharma Sukshma very, very frequently in the scriptures. Why they use Dharma Sukshma is what they're talking, it is so subtle, the intellect pixels can't capture it. It is not that some limited amount of data can capture it. It can't. I'm giving the analogy of pixels for you to understand. When you capture a photo, it's a limited amount of data and it is able to capture a picture. But if you zoom into it, you will see it is not a smooth picture. It really can't capture the beauty of the sun. If you zoom in, the sun will be patchy like this in your beautiful photograph. So the same thing, what you call as your mental framework, your intellectual framework is a framework of data. At a very superficial, zoomed out distance, you will look very nice, the conclusions that you come to. Oh, what a nice theory I have made up. It looks like so clear intellectual clarity. You zoom into it a little bit, it will start looking patchy and ugly. It will start looking contradictory, it will start looking messy, basically. Meaning, if you inquire using your intellect only, if you probe enough sufficiently, you will finally become inconclusive. Whatever you thought was a great conclusion, that this is correct, this is right, this is the final thing I have come to know, that will vanish if you inquire enough. It will vanish, doesn't mean it is all over and there is nothing to be done. Because it vanishes, now you will be wide awake. For every individual situation, you will be wide awake. Because you now know your intellect can't give you a premeditated formula for anything. Intellectual clarity basically means premeditation. You already decided something. This will be like this, that will be like that. If there is this kind of symptom, this kind of indication, then this is the conclusion. It gives you some kind of formula. There's some kind of premeditation. So now that is challenged. Now you can't premeditate, which means you have to only rely on your perceptivity. Thought has no work now. Thought can't help you to see. In fact, thought can't see. We think thought process helps us to see things. Thought process never helps us to see things. It can only block you from seeing things. If you've already premeditated something, it means you're not seeing now. Thought process can only help you articulate what you're seeing now. It can't substitute your seeing. That is where we have made the mistake. That is where we are making a foul play. We are trying to substitute thought process itself as a tool to see. Thought can't see. It is the dead thing from the past, something accumulated from the past. It can only help you articulate something. But for that, you have to see something. If you remember some of my lectures, Bhagavad Gita lectures, I'm taking a random example. If you remember something, you tell me. You just go through any of the lectures that you have heard, not only my lectures, anybody, but now I'm taking my example. There was this lecture on karma, akarma, vikarma. You remember? What did that lecture finally give you? Did it give you clarity? Okay, I'll let you tell. Karma, akarma, vikarma, we explain it. I don't know if you remember what I explained. That akarma need not be inactivity. Akarma can also mean something transcendence from karma. All that I explained so many things. Karma can look like akarma, akarma can look like karma, blah, blah, blah. So finally what happened? Do you see? I have just left you inconclusive. I'm not told you, okay, if this is happening, it is karma. If that is happening, it is akarma. No. You take any lecture for that matter. Finally, all the lectures are only trying to challenge your premeditated conclusions. Some people will have, I'm giving another example. Some people will have some conclusion about emotions are superior to intellect. Heart is above head and all that nonsense. So you need a lecture to tell them, no, there is nothing like that. Emotions are one possible tool you have. Intellect is another tool you have. And both can be used to intensify you in some way. There is nothing like this is absolutely superior to the other. Again, that lecture is not giving you a conclusion. It is just leaving you inconclusive, saying you can't say this way or that way absolutely. I'm just randomly remembering my lectures. You remember any lecture, it finally only challenged any possible hidden conclusions that you had. Or the last one I talked of, not the last one, the one before that I talked about gurus. So there also I just left you inconclusive, saying you can't say that somebody who charges money is necessarily fake guru. At the same time, you can't say somebody who does not charge money is necessarily genuine guru. I did all that. Basically, what I was doing is decoupling all the things and challenging all the conclusions that were already made. Are you following? I'm showing you a pattern in all the things that you have ever heard in a spiritual discourse. The purpose of a spiritual discourse was never to give you intellectual clarity. If it gave you intellectual clarity, it is fine. Suppose now again giving the example of that 3 gunas. If it gave you that knowledge, okay, there are 3, not 2, extremes look similar and all that. I'm not saying it is useless completely. I already talked of it. The only thing I'm saying is that by itself will not give you any clarity of perception. It may help you to explain things to others. So basically, because of changing this hierarchy, because of somehow keeping intellectual clarity above clarity of attention, clarity of perception, you know what is happening in the name of spirituality now? Only concepts are getting spread. Concepts are spreading. Somebody told me extremes look similar. Yes, extremes. I told you extremes look similar. You say yes. You tell somebody else. So only this idea that extremes look similar is spreading. Whether it is really making them inconclusive, whether it is really making them more awake than before, we don't know. In fact, it may be blocking them further, thinking they have come to know something. See, so if you look at something clearly, when you have clarity of perception, I'm telling it is not even a conclusion. You're just acknowledging something as it is. You don't even have to call it as an intellectual conclusion. Like that simple man who has no intellectual clarity about anything. He doesn't know any words. He looked at somebody and he knew, okay, this fellow is sitting quiet out of maturity, not fear. It's not an intellectual conclusion. He's just acknowledging something as it is. So I won't even call this as an intellectual conclusion. It is only a description of something. You are using language and intellect only to describe what you have perceived. You looked at the sun and you said, this is sun. It is irrelevant what you call it, what language you use it. What matters is you seeing the sun. Language may help you to articulate it. But when you said this is the sun, will you call it intellectual conclusion? If I looked at the sun and I said this is the sun, will you call it intellectual conclusion? It's not. It is not an intellectual conclusion. You're just saying, describing something as it is. See, I'm giving very simple example. But it's the same thing. Even if you get into subtler and subtler things, it will become the same thing. When your perceptivity becomes more and more clear, you'll just start seeing subtler and subtler things about a person or about something or whatever, about a situation. You will just see subtler and subtler things. You may not be even articulating it using your language. Your intellect may not even come into the picture. So when you come to spirituality, the only purpose of all the intellectual analysis, all the inquiry, is only to challenge your conclusions, not to give you new conclusions. It will look to you as if some new conclusion is being given, but it is just like suppose there is a politician who is looting you, who's taking all your tax money. When elections comes, he will give you free stuff. He's just giving back to you what he took from you. He's not giving you something new. And he will get all the credit and being a generous politician. No, he just gave back what he took from you. Intellectual conclusions has already taken away your clarity of perception. Now we are using the intellect to revert it. You challenge the conclusions and take away the formulas and rules which you have made. And now the block is gone, you look clearly. Now you may immediately say, oh, it is intellectual clarity. No, it's not intellectual clarity. Intellect did not give you something. It had already taken away your perceptivity. Now you just use the intellect sharply and just reversed it. So it's not an achievement, I'm saying. What you're trying to do with the intellect is not an achievement. It's happening with everything. People have started considering health to be healthy at the age of 40 as an achievement nowadays, isn't it? Why? Because they are meddling with it. They're spoiling their health in so many ways. And therefore now they will tell, if you have some disease by the time you're 40, it's a normal thing. And now they will do yoga and great things and get their health back and they think they have done some achievement. No, you did not achieve anything. You first meddled with it, which was healthy by itself. You meddled with it. You spoiled it. And now you did something and brought it back. So if you ask this question, okay, now I'm in a certain state of clarity of perception. Everybody has certain clarity of perception. Why is that clarity not increasing, or why is the clarity not more than now? Is because there are already some hidden conclusions in people. For you, people may look very unintellectual, but they do have intellectual conclusions. Again, just to give a simple example. See, some of my relatives are some of my friends or even some of my students for that matter. They only look at me as a scholar. He has learned a lot of scriptures. He is very knowledgeable. And therefore, when they ask me a question, do you know why they're asking me a question? It is only because I can refer to Bhagavad Gita or some scripture and give an answer from there. My value lies only in the reference to that I can refer to Bhagavad Gita, meaning for them. Which means they may not be intellectual, but very deeply they have this conclusion that scholarliness is the ultimate thing, knowledge is the ultimate thing. Or at least they will say experience of life. They have a lot of experience behind them, 40 years, 50 years of experience behind them. They will give highest priority somehow to this intellectual domain of knowledge, of wisdom, of life experience, or something like that. They may not be intellectual people, they may be very village people, very simple people. Still, they may have these intellectual things. If I tell I know Bhagavad Gita, they may say, oh, great, you are great. So they already have a hidden conclusion, giving the highest priority to knowledge. They don't acknowledge that there may be somebody who has absolutely no knowledge. He may not even have life experience. He may just be 15 years old, 20 years old. Still, they may have clarity of perception. They are not seeing that because there is a conclusion in them which is blocking that. That question they ask, no, usually they see somebody very young giving a spiritual discourse. People will suddenly get shocked. How can such a young fellow give spiritual discourse? Which means only old people with gray hair need to be telling because they have life experience. Life experience will come in handy. I'm repeatedly telling it. Just like intellectual clarity, knowledge, life experience will also come in handy to articulate things, describe things, make things relatable to you, and so many things. But it is only a subordinate to clarity of perception. Nothing. It cannot become the highest. So why clarity is only this much? Why it is not more than now? It is because there are hidden conclusions. Even if they are very simple people, they have hidden conclusions. They have a hidden conclusion about clarity itself, thinking not scholarliness is what gives clarity. What I am telling is something very, very fundamental. If this is not challenged, this is one of the deepest assumptions that people have. If this is not challenged, you can do your spirituality eternally and it won't help you. You can even go to masters, you can go to scriptures, but it will not demolish the conclusions, intellectual conclusion. It will only make you build new layers of conclusions. I gave you just few examples, but you think of it. Anything that you have heard, any time that you thought you got intellectual clarity, just look at it keenly. All that happened was it just demolished some conclusion that you already made up. It did not give you a new conclusion. You should not be making it a new conclusion because it should only leave you inconclusive. Finally. Yes. Your audio is not there.
A while back, you said that there is actually no. A while back, you said that there is no link absolutely between the intellectual whatever and the direct perception. This one, can you elaborate a bit? Because by using whatever knowledge we have, if we are challenging our conclusions, wouldn't that lead to direct perception? When you say there's no link, that means it will never lead us to direct perception. Something else does.
What I said was intellectual clarity is neither a stepping stone to clarity of perception. Not only that, it doesn't even have any link with clarity of perception. It is unrelated in the sense There may be somebody who has very, very high clarity of perception and absolutely no intellectual clarity. No way to articulate things he doesn't know, to explain it to others. His language is poor, all that. He has no intellectual skills, no logical skills. But some situation is given to him, he can recognize it as it is. So I said it is unrelated. There can be situations where there is clarity of perception and absolutely no intellectual clarity. What you are asking is already answered. The link between, if at all there is a link, the link between clarity of perception and intellectual clarity, the intellectual clarity blocks clarity of perception. It's blocking. That is the only link. It's already blocking it. So you are doing intellectual processing to remove the block.
And that would lead to the direct perception, might, if we do
Yes.
successfully.
Yes, so, and that's what I explained just now. So when you do this, it looks to you as if intellectual clarity is what is leading you to clarity of perception. That's what I negated. I'm saying it's not something intellectual clarity is achieving for you. It is already meddling with you, already hindering you, already blocking you in some way. It is just reversing it. So it's not, you can't say intellectual clarity is leading you to clarity of perception. Somebody takes away money from you, gives it back to you. Will you call them generous? Because of them, I am getting money. He took your money first. You didn't know. And finally, for some situation, they got cornered and they gave back your money to you only. So will you admire them? You are great, you are very generous, you are giving me money in my difficult times. Did money come to you because of them? You already had, you didn't even know. You had money, you didn't know. It's not, I'm just clarifying, it is not giving you something. All your, that's why I gave other examples. All your attempts of going to health coach and installing Healthify app and this and that is not giving you health. Health was supposed to be your natural state. You did something and ruined it. So what you're getting back is not even a getting back as such. You're just reverting it to its natural state. I know it is very, very difficult to swallow this.
It is. I'm just not able to get my head around this. What are you saying?
I am not. See, I am not completely rubbished intellect. I am saying it is already blocking you, and because of that, you should be using it just to unblock it and make you inconclusive. There are already hidden conclusions. You are just using the intellect to challenge them and become inconclusive. Dharma can't be captured. Dharma is saying. Dharma can't be captured with your intellect. That this is right, that is wrong. It just can't be captured. It is so subtle, it is beyond pixelation. It can't be captured as a photo, as a psychological photo or something. Because I'm confusing thought, activity of thought as perceptivity. I think that thought is helping me look at the world clearly. Because of that, all my energy is invested. I'm invested into my thought process. I'm looking less and thinking more. So that is already happening. If you challenge it, it means now your energies will go into making you awake and attentive, not into your thoughts. Your energy will be freed, basically. It was earlier just running a particular A conclusion means a particular pattern of thought. A particular pattern has been made. So when you come across a situation, instead of seeing the subtleties of that situation, you will try to fit the situation into your thought process, into your thought modes. You said this is like this, that is like that. So what is getting empowered is this thought factory. Whose energy will start running in that pattern only. This energy is not free, it's bound. So inconclusiveness means this is challenge. Now this thought form is shattered. You realized, oh yes, I can't make this conclusion. Now when a situation comes in front of you, your energies will go for looking towards it, looking at it keenly. Because now the energy is free. It's not busy running your thought factory. You will start noticing subtler and subtler things now. With people, with situations, and so many things. And that you can intellectualize it. Intellect can come into picture later. Once you have seen subtler and subtler things, you can use your intellect to tell it to others. And what you tell others will be valid, strictly speaking, only for that particular situation. You can describe to them in this situation, this is what is happening. You can generalize it saying, this is what we usually do, blah, blah. But you are not giving them a formula. If they take it as a formula, they're making one more conclusion. They will look at the next situation they encounter with the mold that they have made up now. Too many people are raising their hand, yes. Yeah, Amarjit. 1 minute, Amarjit. First, I think. What, tell me?
I was talking about, I was thinking of one more aspect or one more perspective to it is that, let's say you don't have, a quality of where you can perceive things that well, where you are able to make a very clear decision or conclusion that I know that this is right, this is wrong. Let's say we don't have that. And at the same time, you don't want to depend on your intellect also to make conclusions, because somewhere you know that can also be wrong. Then you're actually in a very difficult situation. You're in a soup.
That's good. When you come into that,
right, but then practically in a practical life, it becomes extremely. You feel, I mean, you appear like a fool because you're not able to take sides. You're not able to take decisions. But you cannot depend on your intellect because that would be wrong in doing. If you're doing that, it is wrong.
Understood.
Because you're not sure of what you're doing.
Understood. So if you get into that soup more and more and more, that's good, because now you are coming to a point of higher and higher intensity. You are cornering yourself. That is good. When you said practical world is eventually supposed to corner us and show us that I am a fool. I don't have clarity of perception. The more practical situation, that is the practicality of this. The more practical situations happen this way, the more they corner you, the more you will feel like as if in a pressure cooker not knowing what to do. You will see how ineligible you are to handle even a very simple thing. That's good. It should continue and continue and continue. At some point, your deepest investment into the intellect will break. To break that, you need that intensity. Otherwise, it won't. Otherwise, presently, you are, again, whatever is being told and whatever you are hearing now is again only understood as an intellectual conclusion only. That intellect can't help me. I'm invested in the intellect and all that. But in those investments are happening in such deep layers. We don't even have access to them now. It's happening. We have made investments, and that investments are going every month like EMI. We don't even know it is happening. To go to that depth and shatter that pipeline, you need great intensity. And it can come only in the moments, such moments of getting cornered. See, for the sake of whatever practicality you are telling, for the sake of the external situation, some decision has to be made and you will make some decision and you will go ahead with it. But within you, you should be very clear that you just compromised. You just made a decision because you just had to make some decision. So inwardly, it should only go on building your treasure. And should make you realize how incompetent presently the level of perceptivity is to even see something simple. And actually, people need not come to it because of listening about it and understanding it. People can come to it intuitively also. They can see they are so incompetent to do even a small thing or to see something clearly. I am not telling all this because I have outgrown this whole process. I am telling all this because I am also still in that process. And this has happened to me repeatedly. Even when I was lecturing in Prashanti, that is one of the reasons I stopped lecturing. I don't know if I told this. The lecture is happening as a conflicting force. I know I have some clarity. At the same time, I was seeing how limited and incompetent it was. And even now it is happening that way only. So the actions are happening with the awareness that there is no full clarity. Not only clarity, a lot of other things. I may not have the skills of language and words and logical skills to give examples and all. So many things will come into picture. It's already 2 hours. Want to stop?
Today you have really unsettled me.
Unsettling. See, if I had told intellectual is absolutely useless, you can't do anything, that would be kind of, now next what kind of thing? No, I didn't say such a thing. I only said intellectual clarity. There is no such thing as intellectual clarity. And I just decoupled it from clarity of perception. And this can exist without this at all. And this can exist without this at all. And this idea that this one is a stepping stone to other is not true. I decoupled it. So the next question that would naturally come is, then what is the use of using the intellect, doing all this? And I clarified, why we are doing all this intellectual thing analysis is to only challenge the hidden conclusions. They have to be challenged. If you leave them, they will be operational. They will not go.
But why intellectual clarity is not stepping stone for perception? There may be
ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳಾಯ್ತು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ.
ಅಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದೊಂದು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್.
No, we are not able to accept it. That is the problem. You said.
Intellect is only undoing the damage intellect was doing earlier. It is not leading you to anything new. It is not causing anything. It is not creating anything.
Okay.
This particular conclusion of particular assumption of giving higher priority to intellectual clarity, or even assuming there is something called intellectual clarity, it shows up in many ways. I talked about some of the things earlier. For example, sometimes after lectures in Prashanti, people would come and ask me, from which book did you learn all this? Implicitly, it means they are giving the highest priority to some recorded information, knowledge. They are not considering the possibility that I am able to see something clearly and I am describing it. So I used to simply ask them, who came first? Human beings came first or books came first? Human beings came first. They saw something, then they recorded it. That became knowledge. And now we are reading it because we are not able to see it ourselves. It's secondhand and it is subordinate to actual clarity. It can't substitute actual clarity. So this confusion between psychological knowledge and clarity of perception has been always happening with everything. So we are taking knowledge only because we are not able to see everything by ourselves. And now objectively knowledge has its own place. It's not that you personally have to experiment everything about every aspect of life. Somebody has to do physics experiment, they will tell you this is the result. It doesn't mean you have to yourself do the experiment and see the result. Their objective knowledge has its place in particular fields of life. All that is a different matter. But we can't convert life itself into some kind of subject which can be put into a book. It can't be. And that is the attempt of the mind, actually. That is the deceptive attempt of the mind, because it wants to retain its supreme position.